The first thing that hit me as I pulled into the driveway was the smell of the vineyard. That earthy mix of sun-warmed soil and ripe grapes. It was the scent of home. After years overseas, I'd nearly forgotten how it felt to be here, where the rows of Cabernet vines stretched endlessly under the California sun. I parked my truck and stepped out, gravel crunching under my boots. The house came into view, a sprawling, Mediterranean-style estate with cream stucco walls and a red-tiled roof. Welcome home, Ethan, banner fluttered over the porch, but it was the three figures standing at the top of the steps that drew my attention. Olivia was front and center, her blonde hair gleaming like polished gold. She wore a white sundress, perfectly tailored, as always. On either side of her were Sophia and Jake, my kids. Jake was practically bouncing out of his sneakers, while Sophia stood still, clutching the porch railing. "Daddy!" Jake's voice rang out as he took off running, barreling into me like a miniature linebacker. "Hey, buddy." I laughed, catching him in a bear hug. He groaned, but he still fit against my chest like when he was little. "Did you fight bad guys?" he asked, pulling back just enough to look up at me. "Something like that," I said, ruffling his hair. Sophia approached more cautiously, her steps hesitant. She was 12 now, so much taller than when I'd left, with her mother's sharp features but my dark hair and serious eyes. I opened my arms, and she stepped into them, but she stiffened when I hugged her. "Missed you, kiddo," I said, pulling back to look at her. "Missed you too," she said quietly, but something in her gaze felt guarded. Olivia finally stepped forward, placing a perfectly manicured hand on my arm. "Welcome home," she said, her smile poised and polished. It felt rehearsed. "You must be exhausted." I wanted to say, "I'm more than that. I'm grateful. I'm relieved. I'm ready to come back to the life we built together." But the words caught in my throat. "Just glad to be here," I said instead. That evening, the house was alive with activity. Connor, my younger brother, had insisted on throwing a barbecue to celebrate my return. He'd always been the social one, the kind of guy who could charm a room in 5 minutes flat. "Ethan," he boomed, catching me in a bear hug as soon as I stepped out onto the patio. "Welcome home, man. You've got to try the new vintage Olivia's been working on. She's been running this place like a well-oiled machine." "Yeah." I glanced over at Olivia, who stood a few feet away, laughing at something one of the guests said. She had a glass of wine in her hand and looked completely at ease, like she owned the room. I tried to picture her managing the vineyard while I was gone, making decisions about harvests and production. It felt odd. "Yeah, she's a natural," Connor said, clapping me on the shoulder. "I mean, obviously, the place isn't the same without you, but she's really stepped up." I nodded, but something about the way he said it didn't sit right with me. The party was a blur of faces and conversations. Family friends, neighbors, and a few of the vineyard staff mingled around the patio. I caught up with David, my childhood best friend and now a local cop. "You look good, man," he said, handing me a beer. "How's it feel to be back?" "Strange," I admitted. "Good, but strange." David nodded, his expression shifting. "Listen, Ethan, if you ever need anything, you know where to find me, right?" I frowned. "Of course. Everything okay?" "Yeah," he said too quickly. "Just saying." It wasn't until later, when the sun dipped below the horizon, that I started to notice little things. Olivia hadn't come near me all evening. She'd spent most of her time with Connor, standing close enough to him that their arms occasionally brushed. They laughed together in that easy, familiar way, like they shared an inside joke. Sophia sat on the porch steps, her head bent over a book, but every so often, she'd glance up and watch them, her lips pressed into a thin line. Jake was the only one who seemed oblivious, running around with the other kids, laughing and shouting like it was the best night of his life. Later that night, after the guests had left and the kids were in bed, I found Olivia in the kitchen. She was washing dishes, her back to me. "Long day," I said, leaning against the doorframe. She didn't turn around. "You must be tired." "I am," I admitted, "but I'm glad to be home." She glanced over her shoulder then, her expression unreadable. "It's good to have you back." But something about the way she said it made my stomach knot. When I finally went to bed, The house was quiet, but sleep didn't come easy. I stared at the ceiling, replaying the day in my mind. The looks, the tension, the things left unsaid. For the first time since I stepped off the plane, I wondered if coming home was going to be harder than I thought. The first few weeks back were a whirlwind. It was strange adjusting to civilian life after years of routine, of orders barked in tight formations and days spent planning missions. Now, I was figuring out how to wake up without reveille and build a life that wasn't dictated by a chain of command. I decided to put my military savings to work by starting a security consulting firm. It seemed like a good fit, helping companies fortify their operations, training executives in crisis management, things I knew like the back of my hand. But the shift wasn't as seamless as I'd hoped. One morning, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee, poring over spreadsheets and business plans. Olivia walked in, dressed for her day at the vineyard in tailored slacks and a silky blouse. She looked like she belonged on the cover of a wine magazine, every inch the poised professional. "What are you working on?" she asked, setting her coffee mug down with a delicate clink. "Business plans," I said, gesturing at the papers. "I've got some meetings lined up with potential clients." She slid into the chair across from me, her expression cool. "I thought you'd ease into things a little more. You've barely been home a month." I frowned. "It's not like I'm rushing back into combat, Liv. This is about building something for the future, for us and the kids." "I know," she said quickly, but her tone was edged with something I couldn't quite place. "It's just security consulting? Is that really a market here? Have you run the numbers?" I tapped the spreadsheet. "Yes. I've been over them a dozen times." She glanced at the papers, but didn't say anything for a moment. Then she added, "Maybe you should talk to Connor. He's great with finances." I leaned back in my chair, the comment hitting a nerve. Why would I need Connor's advice? I've been managing budgets in the military for years. Olivia shrugged, picking up her coffee. "He's just good at this kind of thing. That's all I'm saying." Her words lingered long after she left the room. Sophia had been acting different, distant. Most kids her age are glued to their phones, but she seemed almost secretive about hers. She'd turn the screen away whenever I walked into the room and got defensive if I asked what she was doing. One evening, I found her sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. "Hey, Soph," I said, sitting down beside her. "What's so interesting?" "Nothing," she said quickly, locking the screen and shoving the phone into her pocket. "You've been pretty glued to that thing lately," I said casually. "Who are you texting?" "Just friends," she said, not meeting my eyes. I studied her for a moment. "You can talk to me, you know, about anything." She looked up then, her hazel eyes narrowing slightly. "Like you talk to Mom? You're always questioning her, like you don't trust her." The comment caught me off guard. "What are you talking about?" "You're always asking where she's been, or who she's with. She's doing everything around here while you're off doing your thing." Her words stung more than I wanted to admit. "It's not about trust," I said carefully. "I just want to make sure everything's okay." Sophia stood up, her arms crossed. "Maybe if you were around more, you'd know." She stormed off, leaving me sitting there, speechless. A few days later, Martha, our neighbor, stopped by with a basket of homemade muffins. She was a retired schoolteacher, always full of neighborhood gossip, but with a kind heart. "I was just thinking how nice it is to see you back, Ethan," she said, settling into one of the kitchen chairs. "This place wasn't the same without you." "Thanks, Martha. It's good to be back," I said, pouring her a cup of tea. She took a sip, then leaned forward conspiratorially. "Of course, you're lucky to have family to help out. Connor was over here a lot while you were gone. He and Olivia seemed thick as thieves, always talking about the vineyard." I froze, my hand tightening around my mug. "Connor was here often?" "Oh, yes. But that's what family does, right? I'm sure it was nothing." She patted my arm, oblivious to the storm brewing in my head. Connor and Emma's marriage had always seemed solid, but lately, there was a tension between them that was hard to ignore. Emma was quieter than usual at family dinners, her gaze often fixed on her plate while Connor joked and carried on like everything was fine. One afternoon, I found Emma in the vineyard, tending to a row of vines. "Hey," I said, walking up beside her. "How's it going?" She looked up, startled. Oh, Ethan. Fine. Just trying to keep busy. Her tone was strained, and I could see the faint lines of worry etched across her face. You and Connor okay? I asked carefully. She hesitated, her hands fumbling with a pair of pruning shears. We're fine. Just the usual stress of running a business. I didn't press her, but her answer didn't sit right with me. That night, as I lay in bed, I replayed the past few weeks in my mind. Olivia's comments about Connor, Sophia's defensiveness, Martha's casual mention of Connor's visits, and Emma's unease. They all pointed to something, but I couldn't quite piece it together. I stared at the ceiling, a knot of suspicion tightening in my gut. Something was off. I just didn't know what. I didn't set out to find anything that day. If anything, I was trying to put the unease behind me, to stop reading into every look, every word, every absence. But sometimes, the truth has a way of finding you, even when you're not looking. Olivia had left her purse on the counter while she was out at the vineyard. It wasn't something I normally touched. I'm not the kind of man who snoops through his wife's things. But as I reached for the pile of mail next to it, the purse tipped slightly, and something slipped out. It was a folded piece of paper, a receipt. I bent down to pick it up, intending to toss it back in. But the words on the slip of paper stopped me cold. Lakeview Lodge, Room 14. The date printed at the top sent a chill down my spine. It was from 3 weeks ago, when I'd been out of town on a business trip, meeting with potential clients for the security firm. I stood there, staring at the receipt, the world tilting slightly under my feet. Why would Olivia have a receipt for a hotel room? And why hadn't she mentioned it? Later that evening, as I tucked Jake into bed, I decided to press for answers in the gentlest way I could. He was 8, innocent, unfiltered, and too young to understand how his words might carry weight. Hey, buddy, I said, sitting on the edge of his bed. What's the best thing you and Mom have done lately? Any fun adventures? Jake's face lit up. Oh, Uncle Connor took us to Mom's favorite cabin a few weeks ago. It was cool. We had hot dogs and made s'mores. My chest tightened. A cabin, huh? Where was it? I dunno, Jake said with a shrug. The one with the lake. Mom says it's her happy place. I nodded, forcing a smile. Sounds fun, buddy. Get some sleep, okay? As I walked out of his room, my mind raced. A lake cabin. A hotel receipt. Connor. When Olivia got home that night, I decided to confront her. I waited until the kids were in bed, until the house was quiet, and there was nowhere for either of us to hide. She was in the kitchen, pouring herself a glass of wine, when I walked in. We need to talk, I said, my voice steady but firm. She glanced up, eyebrows raised. About what? I pulled the receipt from my pocket and set it on the counter between us. This. Care to explain? Her eyes flicked to the receipt, then back to me. Ethan, are you seriously going through my things now? It fell out of your purse, I said, my voice hardening, and it's from the weekend I was out of town. So, I'll ask again. Care to explain? She sighed, setting her glass down with exaggerated patience. I took the kids to Lakeview Lodge for the day. It's not a crime, Ethan. We all needed some time away. With Connor? I asked, my stomach churning. Her jaw tightened. Yes, Connor came. He's family. Or did you forget that? Before I could respond, Sophia appeared in the doorway, glaring at me. Why are you always attacking Mom? Sophia, this isn't about you, I said, trying to keep my voice calm. It is about me, she shot back. You're always making her feel bad, like she's not doing enough. You don't even know what she went through while you were gone. Olivia placed a hand on Sophia's shoulder, her expression triumphant, like she'd won some unspoken battle. I didn't say another word. I just turned and walked out, my fists clenched. The next day, I made a decision I never thought I'd have to make. I called a private investigator. The man came highly recommended, a former detective named Ryan Mathers, who specialized in uncovering infidelity and financial fraud. We met at a coffee shop in town, where I laid everything out, the receipt, the cabin, my suspicions about Olivia and Connor. Ryan nodded thoughtfully as he jotted down notes. Give me a week, he said. I'll see what I can find. It didn't take a week. By the third day, Ryan called me with an update. "I've got photos," he said. The words hit me like a punch to the gut. We met again, this time in the parking lot of a strip mall, where he handed me a manila envelope. Inside were pictures of Olivia and Connor at a secluded lake cabin, their body language far too intimate for a brother-in-law and sister-in-law. One photo showed Connor brushing Olivia's hair back from her face. Another showed them sitting on the porch steps, shoulders touching, smiling like a couple on a weekend getaway. I felt sick, but Ryan wasn't done. "There's more," he said, his tone grim. "I dug into the vineyard's financial records, like you asked. Turns out Olivia and Connor have been moving money from the business into a joint account. Over the past 2 years, they've siphoned nearly $200,000. I stared at him, my mind reeling. 200 grand? Yep. Looks like they've been planning this for a while. There's also a lease in both their names for a property in Napa. My guess? They're setting up a competing vineyard. It was all too much to process. The affair, the betrayal, the theft. My wife and my brother weren't just lying to me. They were building a life together, using my money, behind my back. As I sat in my truck, clutching the envelope of evidence, one thing became clear. I couldn't let this go. Not without a fight. They thought they'd outsmarted me, but they underestimated one thing. I'd spent years in the military learning how to strategize, how to outmaneuver the enemy. And now, the battle was personal. I thought the worst of it had already hit me, but I was wrong. What I'd uncovered so far, the affair, the stolen money, the lies, was just the beginning. As I dug deeper, the full extent of their betrayal began to unravel, and it was darker than I could have imagined. The first clue came from Emma. She called me one afternoon, her voice shaky but determined. "Ethan, can we talk? In person?" We met at a small coffee shop on the edge of town. She looked exhausted, her eyes rimmed with dark circles, and she fidgeted with her wedding ring as we talked. "Connor's been distant," she said hesitantly, staring into her coffee cup. "I know things haven't been great between us, but lately, he's been making excuses to stay out late. And I found some texts." She hesitated, and I could see the weight of what she was about to say pressing down on her. "He's planning to leave me, Ethan. He's been talking to a lawyer about filing for divorce." I clenched my jaw, my pulse hammering in my ears. "Does he know you know?" She shook her head. "Not yet. I haven't confronted him, but there's something else. I overheard him on the phone the other night. He was talking about moving money, about taking what he needed before he cut ties. I don't know what it means, but I think he's planning something." My stomach churned. Connor wasn't just betraying me. He was preparing to destroy Emma's life, too. A week later, Martha stopped by with more unsolicited neighborhood gossip. She had no idea how much her little tidbits were helping me piece things together. "You know, dear," she said as we sat on the porch, "Olivia always spoke so highly of you while you were away. She said you were the perfect provider, always making sure the family was taken care of." I forced a smile, knowing there was a but coming. "Of course, she also mentioned how much you helped Connor," she continued. "It was so generous of you, paying off that loan for him. Poor boy, struggling so much to make ends meet." My blood ran cold. "What loan?" Martha blinked, surprised. "The one Olivia mentioned a couple of years ago. She said Connor needed help, and you were kind enough to send money while you were overseas." I felt like the ground had shifted beneath me. Olivia had encouraged me to send money to Connor, painting him as a struggling husband and father, and I had done it without a second thought, trusting her judgment. But the hardest blow came from Sophia. One evening, I overheard her on the phone in her room. She was speaking in a hushed tone, her words muffled by the closed door. "I just don't know if I can," she said, her voice tinged with frustration. "He's my dad." There was a pause, and then she added, "Mom says it'll be easier once it's all settled. But what if he doesn't forgive me?" I knocked softly, and she jumped, shoving her phone under her pillow. "What are you doing?" she snapped, her face flushed. "I was going to ask if you wanted ice cream," I said, keeping my voice light, though my heart was pounding. "No, I'm busy," she muttered, crossing her arms. I hesitated, then said, "Soph, I know things have been hard since I got back, but if there's something you need to tell me, you can." You know that, right? She avoided my gaze. I'm fine, Dad. Just leave me alone. I walked away, my chest tight with the realization that they'd already begun turning her against me. Ryan, the private investigator, confirmed my fears a few days later. They're grooming Sophia, he said bluntly during our next meeting. Olivia and Connor have been feeding her stories about you. How you're too controlling, how you've never been around. They're positioning themselves as the ones who've always been there for her. My fists clenched on the table. And Jake? They're keeping him out of it, Ryan said. He's too young, and they know he idolizes you. But Sophia, they're setting her up to side with them if things go south. He paused before adding, Ethan, there's more. I found another account. This one is separate from the joint account Olivia and Connor opened. It's in Connor's name alone, and it looks like he's been funneling money out of the joint account into this one. He's hedging his bets. I stared at him, stunned. So, he's planning to cut Olivia out too? Looks that way, Ryan said. Once he gets what he needs, he's leaving both Olivia and Emma in the dust. It was a twisted web of betrayal. Connor using Olivia to steal from me, Olivia using me to bankroll Connor, and both of them manipulating my daughter to ensure their plan succeeded. That night, I sat alone in my truck, staring at the evidence Ryan had gathered. The photos, the financial records, the timeline of events. It all painted a picture of two people who had spent years scheming against me, all while smiling to my face. I thought about Sophia, about the way she defended Olivia, about how easily she'd been drawn into their lies. I thought about Emma, blindsided and heartbroken. And I thought about Jake, still blissfully unaware, his world about to shatter. The rage I felt was unlike anything I'd ever known. But beneath it was something colder, sharper, a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about confronting them. This was about dismantling everything they'd built, piece by piece. They thought they'd won. They thought they'd outsmarted me. They had no idea what was coming. If there was one thing the military had taught me, it was how to plan. Every mission required precision, adaptability, and an understanding of your opponent's weaknesses. And this was a mission. I wasn't just going to confront Olivia and Connor. I was going to dismantle everything they'd built, layer by layer. The first step was protecting my children, especially Sophia. She'd been pulled into their lies, manipulated into seeing me as the enemy. But I wasn't giving up on her. I started spending more one-on-one time with her, finding excuses to take her out for lunch or a walk around the vineyard. She was hesitant at first, guarded, but I didn't push. One afternoon, as we sat under the old oak tree near the property line, I asked her, Soph, do you think I'm a good dad? She looked at me, startled. What kind of question is that? I know I haven't been around much, I said, keeping my tone soft. And I wonder if that's made it hard for you to trust me. Her lips pressed into a thin line, and for a moment, I thought she wouldn't answer. But then she said, it's not just that. Mom says you're too controlling, that you don't let her do what she needs to do for us. My chest tightened, but I forced myself to stay calm. Do you believe that? She hesitated, then shrugged. I don't know. I didn't push further. I just said, I love you, sophomore. And no matter what, I'll always be here for you. Next, I turned my attention to the financial side of things. I spent hours at my office, combing through every account, every document tied to the vineyard and my personal finances. The more I dug, the clearer it became just how deep Olivia and Connor's scheme ran. They'd been siphoning money in small amounts over years, counting on me not being around to notice. I contacted my lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Claire. I want to transfer all liquid assets into a separate account, I told her. And I need to update the ownership papers for the vineyard. My children are to be the sole beneficiaries. Claire raised an eyebrow. Does Olivia know about this? Not yet, I said, and I'd like to keep it that way. David, my childhood friend and local cop, was my next call. I need your help, I told him over beers at his place. He leaned back in his chair, studying me. This about Olivia and Connor? I nodded. David sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. I had a feeling. What do you need? Evidence, I said. Ryan's given me plenty, but I need it to hold up in court if it comes to that. And I need someone to keep an eye on Connor. Make sure he doesn't try to skip town or pull something while I'm setting this up. David nodded slowly. You've got it. Just promise me you'll be careful. This kind of thing can get messy fast. It's already messy, I said grimly. I couldn't let Emma be collateral damage in this. She deserved better than the hand she'd been dealt, and I wanted to give her a way out. Over coffee one morning, I told her, you need to start thinking about life after Connor. She looked at me, startled. Ethan, I don't even know where to begin. Start with you, I said. Talk to someone. A therapist, a counselor, someone who can help you sort through this. You don't have to do it alone. To my relief, she agreed. I helped her find a therapist, and within weeks, I could see a change in her. She was standing taller, speaking more confidently. She wasn't there yet, but she was on her way. Martha, bless her nosy soul, became my unofficial eyes and ears at the house. Can you keep an eye on the kids? I asked her one afternoon. Just let me know if you see anything unusual. Her eyes sparkled with curiosity. You mean like Connor coming around? Or Olivia sneaking off? Exactly. She patted my hand. Don't worry, Ethan. I've got your back. Piece by piece, I laid the groundwork. I created a separate account and moved the vineyard's liquid assets there, locking Olivia out entirely. I updated the ownership papers, ensuring she couldn't touch the vineyard if she tried to divorce me. At the same time, I built a case against her and Connor. With David's help, I documented every financial discrepancy, every suspicious transaction, and every photo Ryan had collected. I also started planting seeds of doubt with people in their circle. A casual comment here, a raised eyebrow there. It didn't take much to make people start questioning Olivia and Connor's intentions. By the end of the month, I had everything in place. Olivia and Connor thought they'd outsmarted me, that they were untouchable, but they didn't see the storm coming. This wasn't just about revenge anymore. It was about justice, about protecting my kids, ensuring Emma could rebuild her life, and taking back what was mine. They wanted to play games. I was about to show them what it meant to lose. I didn't plan to catch them in the act. If anything, I'd been trying to avoid the inevitable, knowing it would make everything harder. But life has a way of throwing you directly into the fire when you least expect it. It happened on a Thursday afternoon. Olivia had said she was heading into town for a vendor meeting. I'd come back early from my office, thinking I'd surprise the kids and take them out for dinner. The house was quiet when I walked in, too quiet. Jake was at a friend's house, and Sophia was likely in her room. As I moved toward the kitchen, I heard muffled laughter coming from the den. I froze. Olivia's laugh. Connor's voice. My gut twisted as I moved closer, my steps silent on the hardwood floor. The door to the den was ajar, and through the crack, I saw them. Olivia was sitting on the edge of the couch, her blouse unbuttoned. Connor leaning over her, shirtless. They were laughing, their voices low but clear. He's so clueless, Connor said, smirking as he leaned in closer. Olivia giggled, pushing his chest playfully. He's too busy with his little security project to notice anything. Honestly, it's pathetic. My stomach churned as they continued. We'll be out of here soon enough, Olivia added, her voice dripping with contempt. And Ethan can keep his vineyard and his self-righteous attitude. We'll have everything else. Connor grinned, pulling her into him. Maybe we'll send him a bottle of the cheap stuff as a thank you. I stood there, rooted to the spot, every muscle in my body screaming for me to burst in, to demand answers, to unleash the fury building inside me. But I didn't. Instead, I backed away quietly, my hands shaking as I left the house. That night, I stared at the ceiling in my bedroom. The image of them together burned into my mind. Their laughter echoed in my ears, their cruel words cutting deeper than I thought possible. But I wasn't going to let them win. If they thought I was clueless, I'd use it against them. Over the next few weeks, I played the part of the distracted husband. I spent long hours at the office, working on what Olivia thought was my consulting business. In reality, I was laying traps. The first step was planting false information. I created a fake investment opportunity, an overseas wine distribution deal that looked lucrative on paper but was actually a carefully constructed trap. I leaked bits of information to Olivia, knowing she'd pass it on to Connor. Sure enough, within days, they took the bait. I saw the transfers from the vineyard's joint account into their secret account, amounts large enough to raise red flags. David, my friend at the police department, helped me document everything, ensuring the transactions were tied directly to Olivia and Connor. Meanwhile, I spent more time with Sophia. She'd been distant for so long, caught in Olivia and Connor's web of manipulation, but slowly, I began to see cracks in her defenses. One afternoon, we worked together in the vineyard, pruning vines under the late autumn sun. "Dad," she said suddenly, breaking the silence, "why are you and Mom fighting so much?" I paused, lowering my shears. "I'm not sure what you mean." "You don't talk anymore," she said, frowning. "And she says you don't care about us." Her words hit me like a punch to the gut. I knelt down, looking her in the eye. "Sophia, that's not true. I love you and Jake more than anything in the world. Everything I do is for you." She studied me, her hazel eyes searching mine. "Then why does it feel like you're not here?" I swallowed hard, realizing how much my absence had affected her. "Because I've been trying to fix things," I said honestly. "Things I should have noticed sooner. But I promise you, I'm here now, and I'm not going anywhere." She nodded slowly, her expression softening. "I believe you." While Sophia's loyalty began to shift, tensions between Olivia and Connor were rising. I saw it in the way they interacted at family dinners, the sharp words, the subtle glares. Connor was growing impatient, pushing Olivia to finalize their plans. "We need to move faster," he hissed at her one evening, not realizing I was within earshot. "Do you think I'm not trying?" Olivia snapped back. "It's not as simple as you think." "Make it simple," Connor said coldly, "or I will." Their partnership was beginning to crack under the pressure, and I was more than willing to help it along. By the end of the month, the trap was set. Olivia and Connor thought they were in control, that they were one step away from taking everything from me. They didn't realize I'd been watching, waiting, preparing for this moment. The pieces were all in place. Now, it was time to make my move. The vineyard was perfect that day, golden sunlight spilling across the rows of grapevines, a crisp autumn breeze carrying the scent of fermenting wine. The setting was idyllic, the kind of backdrop that made people think everything was fine. But today was anything but fine. I'd invited everyone under the guise of celebrating the launch of my security consulting firm. Olivia loved appearances, and I knew she wouldn't resist the opportunity to host a family event that reinforced the illusion of perfection. She had no idea what I had planned. The guest list included family friends, vineyard staff, and even a few reporters I discreetly invited. Local media loved a good success story, and I made sure they'd have one to report, just not the one Olivia and Connor expected. The guests mingled on the patio, sipping wine and chatting, while Olivia floated between groups, wearing her brightest smile. Connor was there, too, laughing with a group of vineyard workers as if he didn't have a care in the world. I stood near the fireplace, watching them. My chest burned with anger, but I kept my expression calm. This wasn't the time to lose my composure. When the crowd was settled, I stepped to the front, holding up my glass. "Thank you all for being here," I said, my voice steady. "Today's not just about celebrating the success of the business. It's about gratitude, for family, for friends, and for the truth." I saw Olivia glance at Connor, her smile faltering slightly. "Good. I'd like to take a moment to share something important with all of you," I continued. "Something I believe deserves to be seen." I turned toward the large screen I'd set up near the fireplace. With a nod to David, who was standing by the projector, the first video began to play. The footage was grainy, but clear enough to see Olivia and Connor at the lake cabin. Their laughter, their intimate touches, it was all there, laid bare for everyone to see. Gasps rippled through the crowd, followed by stunned silence. Olivia's face turned white. "Ethan," she stammered, stepping toward me. "What is this?" I ignored her, addressing the crowd instead. "This is the woman I trusted with my life. The brother I thought would always have my back. This is how they repaid me." Connor's face darkened, his jaw tightening as he took a step forward. "You've got some nerve." I cut him off. "Oh, I'm just getting started." The next slide appeared, spreadsheets and bank statements, highlighting the siphoned funds and forged signatures. For years, Olivia and Connor have been stealing from me, I said, my voice rising. They funneled money from the vineyard into secret accounts, planning to leave me with nothing. They even went so far as to falsify documents to cover their tracks. Olivia's composure cracked. Ethan, please, let's talk about this. No, Olivia, I snapped, my fury finally breaking through. You had plenty of chances to talk. Instead, you lied, cheated, and stole. But the final blow wasn't mine to deliver. Emma, who had been standing quietly at the edge of the crowd, stepped forward. She held her head high, her voice clear and unwavering. And you, Connor, she said, her eyes locking onto him. You didn't just betray Ethan. You betrayed me. You lied to me for years, planning to leave me once you'd gotten everything you wanted. Connor's face twisted into a sneer. Emma, don't. I'm done, she said firmly. I've already spoken to a lawyer. Consider this the official announcement of our divorce. The crowd erupted in murmurs, and Connor's confident facade crumbled. The final slide appeared on the screen. Text between Olivia and Connor discussing their plans to manipulate Sophia. They didn't stop at stealing money, I said, my voice shaking with anger. They tried to take my children. They fed Sophia lies, hoping to turn her against me. But they underestimated one thing. The truth always comes out. I looked at Sophia, who stood frozen in the crowd, her face a mix of shock and guilt. Soph, I'm sorry you had to see this, but I need you to know that none of this is your fault. Tears welled up in her eyes, and she nodded slowly. The silence that followed was deafening. Olivia and Connor stood there, exposed, their humiliation complete. I turned to the reporters. Feel free to write your stories. Let the world see who these people really are. And then, without another word, I walked away. As the crowd dispersed, I found Sophia sitting by herself near the vineyard's edge. Dad, she said softly as I approached. I'm sorry. I sat down beside her, pulling her into a hug. You don't need to apologize, sophomore. None of this is on you. She clung to me, tears soaking my shirt. I didn't know, Dad. I swear, I didn't know. I know, I said, holding her tightly. We'll get through this. Together. That night, as I stood on the porch, watching the sun dip below the horizon, I felt an odd sense of peace. Olivia and Connor had tried to destroy everything I'd built, but they failed. I still had my vineyard, my children, my integrity, and they had nothing. With the public reveal behind me, it was time to ensure Olivia and Connor didn't just lose their dignity. They lost everything they valued. I had no intention of letting their betrayal fade into whispers and rumors. I wanted their punishment to be thorough, legal, and permanent. The first step was filing criminal charges. David, my old friend and local cop, had been invaluable in documenting the financial fraud. Armed with the evidence we'd gathered, I filed a report with the Sonoma County District Attorney's Office. Within days, Olivia and Connor were formally charged with embezzlement, forgery, and conspiracy to commit fraud. When the subpoenas were served, Olivia's polished veneer cracked completely. She burst into tears, pleading with me to reconsider. Ethan, please, she sobbed, clutching my arm. Don't do this. We can fix this. I pulled away, my voice cold. You made your choices, Olivia. Now, you'll live with the consequences. Connor, on the other hand, tried to bluff his way through it. This is just a misunderstanding, he told the DA's investigators. Ethan's making a mountain out of a molehill. But the evidence was airtight. Every forged document, every stolen dollar, every transfer into their secret accounts. It was all there in black and white. I filed for divorce the day after the public reveal, citing adultery and financial misconduct. My lawyer, Claire, was relentless, ensuring Olivia would leave the marriage with nothing. She has no claim to the vineyard, Claire said during one of our meetings. With the updated ownership documents and the evidence of fraud, the court will rule in your favor. True to her word, the court's judgment was swift and decisive. Olivia was stripped of any financial stake in the vineyard, her accounts frozen as the fraud investigation continued. Sophia and Jake were a different matter. Sophia had been manipulated for so long that I wasn't sure how custody would play out. But during the custody hearing, something incredible happened. "I want to stay with my dad," Sophia said firmly, her voice steady. Olivia's face twisted in shock. "Sophia, you don't mean that." "Yes, I do," Sophia shot back. "You lied to me. You lied about everything." The judge awarded me primary custody of both children, with Olivia granted limited visitation rights. The legal fallout wasn't just Olivia's burden. Connor's crimes were exposed as well, and his life quickly unraveled. Emma, emboldened by her newfound strength, filed for divorce. But she didn't stop there. She filed a civil suit against Connor for emotional distress and financial misconduct. "I want full custody of the kids," she told me during one of our conversations. "And I'm not letting him walk away without paying for what he's done." Emma's lawyer, a fiery woman named Marisol Vega, tore Connor apart in court. She presented evidence of his affair, his financial schemes, and his abandonment of his responsibilities as a father. Connor didn't stand a chance. The court awarded Emma full custody, a substantial settlement, and child support payments that would keep Connor in debt for years. In small towns like ours, reputations are everything. Word of Olivia and Connor's betrayal spread like wildfire, thanks in part to the reporters I'd invited to the reveal. At the local winery association meetings, where Olivia and Connor had once been celebrated, they became pariahs. Suppliers refused to work with them, and industry contacts ghosted their calls. Even their friends turned on them. Martha, my nosy but well-meaning neighbor, made sure every dinner party and book club meeting was filled with whispered accounts of their downfall. "Did you hear Olivia had to sell her car to pay her legal fees?" she told me one afternoon, her eyes twinkling with glee. Amid the chaos, I found support in unexpected places. Emma and I grew closer, not romantically, but as allies. We worked together to rebuild her life, ensuring she had the resources she needed to raise her kids and move forward. David, my loyal friend, went above and beyond, using his connections to keep tabs on Connor's movements and ensure he didn't try anything reckless. And then there was Marisol, Emma's lawyer. She took an interest in the vineyard's legal matters, helping me secure additional protections against future threats. Her sharp mind and no-nonsense attitude made her an invaluable ally. By the time the dust settled, Olivia and Connor had lost everything. Olivia moved into a small apartment in town, far from the sprawling estate she'd once shared with me. Her once pristine reputation was in shambles, and her former friends avoided her like the plague. Connor, broke and humiliated, skipped town, leaving behind a trail of unpaid debts and burned bridges. Emma, on the other hand, flourished. She returned to teaching, her confidence growing with each passing day. Her kids thrived under her care, free from the toxicity of their father's influence. As for me, the vineyard continued to thrive. Sophia and Jake were happier than I'd seen them in years, and the three of us began to rebuild what Olivia and Connor had tried to destroy. 5 years later, the vineyard hummed with life on that crisp autumn evening. Workers moved through the rows of vines, their laughter blending with the rustle of leaves as they prepared for the harvest. Over the years, this place had become more than just a business or a home. It was a symbol of resilience, of everything we'd rebuilt after the storm. The porch offered the best view of the estate, and it was where I stood that evening, watching the sun dip below the horizon. Life had found its rhythm again, steady and peaceful, but the scars of the past were still faintly visible, woven into the fabric of our lives. Jake was 13 now, bounding across the lawn with boundless energy. He had Max, our golden retriever, chasing after him, both of them kicking up leaves in their wake. Jake was tall for his age, with my dark hair and Olivia's sharp cheekbones. He'd inherited her charm, too, effortlessly making friends wherever he went. "Dad," he called, running up to me breathlessly. "Can we work on the treehouse tomorrow? I've got the design finished and everything." "Tomorrow morning," I promised, ruffling his hair. Jake grinned, his excitement palpable. He'd become my little builder, always sketching plans for some new invention or project. The vineyard had given him room to explore his ideas and the freedom to just be a kid, a gift I was determined to protect. Sophia, now 17, sat under the old oak tree near the edge of the property, her laptop balanced on her knees. Her focus was intense as she worked on an application for a university viticulture program. She had grown into a poised and thoughtful young woman, her once guarded demeanor now replaced by quiet confidence. When I walked over, she looked up and smiled faintly. "Hey, Dad, did you know UC Davis has a research vineyard? I was reading about their program. They have internships for students in their second year." "That sounds like a perfect fit," I said, sitting beside her. She nodded, tucking her hair behind her ear. "I think it is. I want to learn as much as I can, so when I come back, I can really help here." Hearing her talk about the vineyard with such passion filled me with pride. Sophia had become my anchor, a constant reminder of why I'd fought so hard to rebuild our lives. Olivia still came to visit the kids every few weeks. She'd settled in a small coastal town a few hours away and worked remotely as a freelance graphic designer. Her visits were cordial but restrained, more about maintaining a connection with Jake and Sophia than rekindling anything from the past. She arrived that day in her small sedan, stepping out with a cautious smile. Jake sprinted to greet her, as he always did, while Sophia approached more slowly. "How's my soccer star?" Olivia asked, hugging Jake tightly. "Great. Max and I found this awesome trail behind the vineyard. I'll show you." Jake grabbed her hand, leading her off toward the vines. Sophia's greeting was polite but distant, a hug and a quiet, "Hi, Mom." Their relationship had softened over the years, but hadn't fully healed. Olivia joined the kids for a walk through the vineyard, their laughter drifting back toward the house. Watching them, I felt a pang of mixed emotions, relief that she was making an effort, but also a lingering bitterness I couldn't completely shake. Connor's fall had been much harder. After serving 2 years in prison for financial fraud, he resurfaced in the Midwest, working menial jobs to scrape by. His once charming demeanor had given way to bitterness and resentment, and he burned through whatever goodwill he had left among old friends and contacts. Rumors of his downward spiral trickled back to us occasionally. Stories of bounced checks, evictions, and failed attempts to start over. Emma, who had thrived since divorcing him, sometimes heard whispers of his struggles through mutual acquaintances. Last I heard, he was working as a bartender in some small town in Ohio, she said one evening as we sat on the porch. "It's sad in a way, but he made his choices." Connor had tried reaching out once, sending a handwritten letter to Emma shortly after his release. In it, he'd apologized vaguely for mistakes, but made it clear he felt like the real victim in everything that had happened. Emma never responded. The kids never asked about him, and I doubted they ever would. Connor's absence from our lives was a relief, a toxic presence gone for good. Emma had become a close friend over the years, her transformation nothing short of remarkable. After divorcing Connor, she'd returned to teaching and quickly became one of the most beloved educators in the community. Her 2 children, Sarah and Lucas, were frequent visitors to the vineyard, often joining Jake in his endless adventures. "Mom says we can help with the harvest this year," Sarah exclaimed excitedly as she darted around the vineyard with Jake. "She's more excited than the kids," Emma joked as we watched them. Emma had built a stable, happy life for herself and her children, free from Connor's shadow. Seeing her flourish reminded me of how far we'd all come. As the sun set and the first stars appeared, the family gathered around the fire pit. Jake roasted marshmallows with Sarah and Lucas, while Sophia sat nearby with her laptop, occasionally chiming in on their conversation. Olivia lingered at the edge of the group, sipping tea quietly. She seemed content in her limited role, watching her children from a respectful distance. "Do you think she's happy?" Sophia asked me later, as we stood on the porch watching the fire die down. "I think she's doing the best she can," I said honestly. "Happiness is different for everyone, sophomore. For her, it might just mean finding peace." Sophia nodded, her expression thoughtful. "I'm glad we stayed, though. This feels like home." "It is home," I said, wrapping an arm around her shoulders. The vineyard wasn't just a business anymore. It was the heart of our family, a place where wounds had healed and new roots had grown. The betrayals of the past were now distant memories, lessons etched into the fabric of who we'd become. As I watched the family laugh under the stars, I felt a deep sense of gratitude. This was our life now, steady, imperfect, and undeniably ours.